Pucks with Haggs is brought to you by Fanduel, the exclusive wagering partner of the CLNS Media Network.
Welcome to another edition of the Pucks with Haggs podcast. As always, I'm your host, Joe Haggerty. You can find my stuff at joehaggerty.substack.com, all kinds of articles about the Bruins and the NHL. Please subscribe to the premium package and you will get all content that I write sent right to your email inbox. With me today, my good buddy from the Standard Times, Mick Colageo. Mick, thank you for joining me as always. Before we get into it, I just want to say quickly, shout out to our sponsors, Fanduel Sportsbook. It's NFL season. It's time to get involved with the betting and throw some money in there. And usually you get more than that back when it comes back at you. Fanduel Sportsbook. They're not popular because they're hoarding all the money. They're giving it back to their bettors and people that are winning. Also, let's give a little shout out to Factor Meals, again, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit. If you've got less than 2 minutes or 2 minutes to get a meal prep, that's who you want to go with. We'll get more to them later. But Mick, for right now, let's go through a little bit of Bruins news here. First off, selfishly for us, captain's practice is coming. We've got the announcement that we're actually going to go to the rink, see some skating, talk to some players. Just how excited are you to get the juices flowing and to get back into the mix of talking to some players and getting hockey going here?
A cool, clean, crisp morning brings a tear to my eye. I mean, I expect to hear the marching band down the street telling me there's a high school football game coming up Saturday morning or Friday night. But yeah, I mean, hockey's. I get the hockey in the air, and next thing you know, it's coming quick, and I can't wait. I do find it weird that there's like 3 captain's practices over a 14 or 21 day period, whatever the heck that is. It's a strange thing to have such a hard schedule. It used to be such an informal phenomenon.
That's our age showing, right? Where it used to be you just showed up when you knew they were going to be down there and start talking to them, and it wasn't even sort of anything organized or administered by the Bruins staff or anything like that. It's a whole different ball game now but it's like that in every facet of covering professional sports, where it's all sort of
about the player security drives the bus.
Yes, 100%. So like that's what it is now. And it also rookie camp is getting going, and that's part of the reason there's such a big gap between them. Where I think rookie camp is going to be.
Everybody's got to go to Buffalo. Yeah,
and we're going to be talking to those guys in Boston, and then they go to Buffalo. And to be honest with you, I think 3 or 4 days really is all we need to talk to the players before training camp even starts. I think there's some pretty cut and dry storylines as to this team and what's going on and training camp. And there's also a lot of question marks. Like, we're not going to know a lot as far as assessing this team and where they are, who they are, how the pieces are going to fit, all that stuff, until we see actual games and training camp practices. And, so many of the unknowns become known a little bit, and we learn how these new combinations will work, how the center spots are going to work, all that stuff. Obviously the defenseman, I think, is a pretty known quantity in goalies, but all eyes are going to be pointed towards the forwards, and that's a real unknown with all the new combos coming into training camp.
Right. We got Zacha and we got Coyle. Who else is going to play center?
Yeah. And there's a lot of them.
I think there's probably 16 wannabes and maybe 5 legitimate candidates.
But even Coyle and Zacha, there's a lot of unknowns, because Coyle is going to be potentially not. I think the first and second line will be fairly interchangeable. I don't know if one's going to be a true first line or second line. I think they're going to be both on equal footing. But you're talking about Charlie Coyle being in a much more featured spot than he's been in the past. And, he was on with WEI last week during the Jimmy Fund Telethon and talked about how excited that he was for that opportunity and how ready he was for it. And he certainly showed that during the playoffs last year when he was in that spot. But, the night in, night out, being a top 6 center in the NHL is not something he's really been in Boston. So that's going to be very new, as well as playing with Brad Marchand and Jake DeBrusk. That is also going to be very new and something we haven't seen much of. And, Zacha in the middle with Pasternak and probably James Van Riemsdyk, as a great article by Steve Conroy this week. He sat down with Jim Montgomery, and Montgomery kind of mapped things out where that's what he's looking at is Brad Marchand, Charlie Coyle, Jake DeBrusk, and then Pasternak, Zacha, and James Van Riemsdyk, at least to start. So like even those top six, there's a lot of unknown as to how those combos are going to work, how Zacha's going to work as a full-time center. They're obviously good players, but there's a lot to sort of look at and dissect as far as chemistry and how those pieces are going to work together goes.
Now, let's be honest. This is a podcast, so we can say it. That is neither the outcome that he nor the Bruins management want.
Right.
So, but like a high school basketball coach, you put the seniors on the floor to start the season, even if you got a sophomore or freshman who you needs to necessarily go through the process of earning his spot. You have to let that play out. But they know the outcome that they want because they know what they believe about the players. For them, ideally, Coyle still becomes the captain of the bottom six, like he has been, and holds down that, and they get an emerging candidate who can support Marchand and DeBrusk, whether it's a plumber like Morgan Geekie or more of a skills guy. They got to figure out something there so that they can have a real top nine credibility to their lineup and not have a hodgepodge bottom six. Because if you pull up Coyle, that means you had to, not that you wanted to. So in as much as he's a wonderful player and capable of playing, as we talked the last time you had me on about, in short segments and that, and hold up his end of it. And more than that, he was terrific. Hey, if the Bruins found any one of 17 ways to beat the Panthers in that series, which they seemed like they had 17 ways that they could have done it and failed at all 17, Charlie Coyle would have been a Conn Smythe discussion at that point. He played a great series.
After the first round, no doubt. And like, that's, I have no doubt that they can do it in spurts. Like they were doing it in Florida at the beginning of that series with Krejci and Bergeron out. It was Zacha and Coyle. And I have no doubt that there's going to be nights where they're going to be perfectly fine in those spots. And I think they will be in those spots because I'm not sure that I'm not sure they have any freshmen or sophomores that are going to be pushing them, unfortunately. Like, I think that's probably what we're going to see at the end of training camp and the start of the season is that those are the real viable top six candidates that they have. And maybe Morgan Geekie, like I'd put him in a category where maybe they project him to, he can elevate his game. But like,
when you consider the line driving talent of Marchand and the scoring talent that DeBrusk has and how he's become a three zone player, then you can have a plumber be your center, and a physical element in that is probably, and a right-handed shot.
But I don't think they think Morgan Geekie's a plumber. I feel like they think he's a little better than that, and there's some upside there that they.
Well, I don't mean it plumber as in that's all you're good for. I mean, I think that they think he's got upside to explore here.
Yeah. But that's a lot to trust somebody in a top six role. You know what I mean? Like he's going to have to really, really prove that. And I'm much more sort of pessimistic about him being able to do that night in and night out. And also the Jake DeBrusk aspect of it, how much of that was a Bergeron effect where he was a three zone player, where he was, much more effective the last couple of years. You remove that line driving center from it. Does all of a sudden he sort of his performance drop, or he's not the player that we seemed to think he was the last couple of years? This is what I mean by there's a lot of
I know what you're saying. Yeah,
there's a lot of things going on.
I agree. You can put an X factor there. I'm confident that DeBrusk is going to prove that he is the player that we saw before he got injured, winning the Winter Classic, but before the Bruins. But
it's a big difference lining up at right wing with Bergeron as your center or Morgan Geekie as your center. You know what I mean?
Sure, absolutely.
That's my point.
Now there's more on your shoulders, and I think Marchand's been gradually simulating the line driving role there, and Bergeron sort of became the hovercraft. Let's see. It's kind of like a dad playing with his two sons, and watching over them and sort of just being there, letting them play the game, and then going in when he needs to. That's sort of me where Bergeron's last 5 years were. And Marchand was sort of the driver of the play. And now I think that that's going to be even more so the case, but in a different way, because there'll be a more specific role for whoever their center is.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting. I mean, that's what we're all going to be watching. It's nice that Monty kind of outlined what it's going to look like at the start of training camp and gives the players an idea of who they're going to be playing with to start. And, I still feel like at the end of the day, it may be Coyle and Zaka to start the season, and they're going to try to get through the first few months with them and then end up making a bigger move down the line because they maybe don't have the personnel where any of those guys are going to be able to handle it on a regular basis. But it'll be interesting. And I agree with you that, like, no matter what happens, Pasternak and Marchand are going to be the line drivers on those lines. It's not going to be the centers. It's going to be the star wingers that they have. Another news item here. Danielle Marmer is leaving player development for the Boston Bruins, and she's going to be the GM of the Boston entry in that new PWHL women's league that's going to get off the ground in January. Just, she did a really good job player development with the Bruins, I think. Credit to them for promoting people that they have through their mentoring program that they've instituted. And, I'm curious to see how she's going to do. And I also am curious to see how that new women's league is going to do. And hopefully it's a rousing success that now we'll get the backing of the NHL because it's one sort of unified women's league, and they could start with these original 6 teams and kind of, turn it into something that girls like my daughter Zoe can look at and aspire to be maybe someday as a hockey player.
It's a long time coming, that the unification, and it's quite a variety involved with these general managers. And it's nice that they're not trying to do it with 18 teams.
Yes.
So I think that you can always grow, you can always expand, solidify what you have. And it's awesome that Daniel Marmer is among those early half dozen. Are they an original 6? Is that how many there were?
I believe there were 6. Yeah. There's Montreal, Toronto, Ottawa, Boston, Minnesota, and New York, I think.
Yeah, right. Right. And they're going to keep the branding, right? So it's going to be the Pride. It's going to be the Riveters. Probably.
I don't know about that. That part, I don't think they were,
not
sure
committed to
on.
that.
Yeah, I think
that continuity.
Right now they're like names TBA. I think they just call them like the city franchise, maybe because they don't have the rights or whatever. I'm not sure.
Boston hockey team.
Right. You would hope it turns into the Boston Pride, though, right? Like, I mean, they're off to a pretty good start as a franchise in Boston with winning all the Isabel Cups. So maybe
I know there's a different, there's always philosophical debate when something like this happens, that some people feel like there's departure is the important thing, to be distinct and say this is the all new, and you won't see any of the old in this carrying over. But I think it can also be a huge mistake to not bring along the great supporters of the game that have been involved all along in the various iterations of the NWHL or the Canadian version that preceded it. Some of these guys, just terrific people, and with Bobby J, and it's just there's tons of them, and so I hope that the Paul Maras of the world are, if they want to be involved, that they are.
Well, I was going to say Paul Mara in particular. I saw that. Just the other day, I think he's got hired by the Rangers to do something for them. So he might be they may be looking for a new coach for the Boston Pride. I don't know how that's going to work with him. And
you think I would know this? I chit chatted with Peter Laviolette Saturday night. So we were at a cookout.
Oh, really?
Well, we had my cousin Bill Anne Marie is Peter's mother-in-law.
Oh, okay.
And so she married her high school sweetheart from Norway, who played with Richie Hebner, who went on to win the World Series with the Pittsburgh Pirates.
Richie Hebner, yes, I remember.
Yes, yeah. He was one of the first great high school hockey player I remember watching up at Four Seasons Arena in Walpole when I was a Ute.
I've got plenty of Richie Hebner baseball cards.
Yeah, cool. That's awesome. Maybe I can get one autograph for you if you'd like. But in any case, So Billy Hassenfuss, married my cousin Ann, and then Ann's their daughter Kristen married Peter. So so Peter's been in the family, since the 90s. So so we had a fun chit chat, after golf, because his brother-in-law Billy does a charity golf tournament every summer, and so I hacked around in that last Saturday.
How'd you shoot him, Mick?
You know what? For how often I didn't play this year, I wasn't terrible. My short game was surprisingly good. Kept most of my drives straight, but I've lost a lot of distance.
I mean,
These old bones don't do what they used to do.
You just described old man golf to a T. That's it right there.
I can't believe I've become that player because I
good
used
short
to be
game, good putting, and everything is short and straight.
I used to be drive for show, putt for humiliation. Now I've become my grandfather.
Yes, times have reversed themselves.
I know this is a little off topic, but it just occurred to me while I was thinking before we went on today. Last season's Bruins team, if I start with the, say 13 forwards and I just go Marchand, Bergeron, DeBrusque, Zacha, Krejci, Pasta, Taylor Hall, Coyle, Bertuzzi, Foligno, Nosek, Freddie, and had Hathaway as 13. Doesn't matter the order. That's not the point. And then look at their ages last year, as listed on Hockey Reference at the start of the season. And they were average 30 years old up front. This year, if I looked according to Cap Friendly and I go down the line as far as the top paid forwards and whittle my way down, and it's winds up a conventional lineup because there's so many 22-year-old interchangeables near the bottom, and Lauko's 23 now.
Yep.
So with that, in 28.5.
And you also removed the two oldest players to reteirement, so that
I did. I did
well.
not include Alex Chason. He's unsigned, and I think I don't know if there's a relationship with the agent, and hey, can you give him a PTO? Come on, or it's really more of a thing where Don Sweeney just cannot stop himself from putting as many veterans as he can in front of prospects like a picket fence and say, "Here's your bar, leap over it."
But I mean, they will be younger, though. To your point, they're going to be younger this coming season, no question, because
they're going to be younger at the end of the season than they are right now. This is a classic season. This is like 1991-92. You had Brent Ashton and some of those retreads from the Minnesota North Stars of the '80s, and you wind up with it by the end of the year. You have an Olympic year, so then you got Juneau, Hines, Donato, Glenn Murray pops up from junior, and suddenly there's this completely different feel to the front of it. Now, we don't have one of those seasons coming up, but I have a funny feeling that the fact-finding mission is going to yield a certain endorsement of players under the age of 24 who are going to take spots. Yeah,
and Mason Lohrei, and I would look at as one of those guys potentially to come in, and Mason Lohrei, the defenseman, towards the end of the year. You know what I mean? Not at the beginning. I think he's got times and things to work on, but I think
even with Ian Mitchell, because I feel like he's the Shattenkirk, and then they signed Shattenkirk.
Yeah.
So then what do you go from there? Does Lohrei find his way into this mix? And it's maybe
I would think so.
One that's going to happen through injury or maybe there'll be a deal with Drew Grizz later in the season.
Well, that's what I'm thinking is more. If he shows that he's ready in Providence, that frees them up to trade a veteran, put him into the lineup, and the salary cap turnover starts to happen that they need to happen anyway. And it's still incumbent on Don Sweeney to try to find ways to recoup some draft picks that he's traded away if he can. And that's a good way to do it. If you have young players that can supplant veterans that you can trade away and start to get some kind of yield of draft picks back along with salary cap relief. So I think all that stuff is going to be in play. I think, this is going to it's a transition year for the Bruins. And I think there's not too much that's going to be ruled out as something you can't do here. You know what I mean?
Which is hard because on the other hand, it's important that the coach establishes certain, he has certain little things he can plug together and say, okay, I have this.
Right.
What does he have? He has Carlo and Lindholm. He has a great goaltending tandem. He has Zacha and Pasta. He has Marchand and DeBrusque. Yep. There's certain things that we can pretty much expect that he's not going to tinker with certain building blocks because your foundation has to exist somewhere.
Right.
You have to have it somewhere. And whatever you do, whether whoever Charlie plays with predominantly, or it's based on what they're facing, the kind of team they're playing against, or what they want to get out of, their offense, But I don't. But this is a weird year for that. It's the exact opposite of last year. There's way more X factor, way more moving parts than there are those that are etched in stone.
Yeah, and exactly. I don't think they're going to be married to anything, because I don't think this is going to be, anything close to what that team was on the ice and in the standings last year. So they're going to have to entertain all kinds of different things, think about things in a different way, make moves that they weren't going to make the last few years when they were, very much legit Stanley Cup contenders. I'm not sure that is going to be the kind of season that this is going to be, but more on that in a sec, because that actually transitions into something that we're going to talk about next. But real quick, I just want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Fanduel Sportsbook, the exclusive wagering partner of the CLNS Network. Get ready for the NFL season with incredible offers from Fanduel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Plus, all customers who bet $5 will get $100 off Sunday ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Now is the best time to join FanDuel. The app is easy to use, and you can be on everything from spreads to player props and more. So visit FanDuel.com/Boston and kick off the NFL season with an offer you do not want to miss. It's a great promotions every day. It's a safe and secure app. You get paid instantly when you win, which a lot of people do at FanDuel Sportsbook. So give it a try. Go over and take a look if you haven't yet. Get going with your $200 in bonus bets guaranteed, and have some fun with the football season coming up. Now we are on to our main thrust of the discussion here. And this was also from Steve Conroy's article with Jim Montgomery this week in the Herald, and I wrote about this over at Substack. After this is Jim Montgomery talking, and I am asking this in the vein of the question, are we underestimating this Bruins team going into this season? And he references last year. After our regular season, I think a lot of people forget all the question marks on our team before last year. I think it's very similar to this year, that we're a bubble team, and that's what people were saying about us last year. What I like is we have tremendous opportunity. I know we have great players. I know we have really good leaders. For me, the exciting part is how good can we be? I don't know what our ceiling is yet, and that's what makes this training camp a little more exciting than last year's, because there's a lot more moving parts. Some people look at it as daunting. I don't. I look at it as an opportunity for a lot of players to become real good Bruins for us, and for us to find out our identity as a team and how we're going to win games this year. And part of that is the glass is always full. Jim Montgomery, very optimistic, very energetic and positive about his team. But to his point, and I think he makes a good point, people were talking about that Bruins a year ago at exactly this time. People were not excited about that Bruins team. They were saying that they were a bubble team, a wild card team at best, not happy coming out of the playoff series from the spring before, where they lost to the Hurricanes in the first round. There was not a lot of anticipation or excitement about the Bruins at all. And as it turned out, everybody was wrong, and they were way better than anybody thought they could have been or they would be. Are we falling into the same trap with the Bruins this year, where we're drumming down expectations and sort of muting excitement on all levels, and basically saying the same thing? They're a bubble team, maybe a wild card team. Are we underselling this team and setting up for another instance where the team's going to be far better than we think, because there's still a lot of talent on that roster, and there are definite building blocks that, to your point, Coach Montgomery is going to have to build around and to sort of rely upon for success against other teams in the league?
I don't think it's possible to subtract the players that you subtract from last year's team, replace them with the players that were signed or acquired for this year's team, and then say that that concern is without merit. Yep. Or it's not, or is no different from last year. I think that's a litigation argument. I don't think he believes the words that were coming out of his mouth. I think it's Coach BS.
No, that's Jim Montgomery. He's like super positive and positive.
I think any coach has to do it. I don't begrudge him that. It's just that he's, but he's finding a way to spin. I do see. Here's where right in the crease, Linus Ullmark. It blows my freaking mind that Linus Ullmark could have the season he had, take 14 undecided games, and swing them Boston's way with grade A turnaways midway through the third period of 1 goal or tie games. And you see you look down on the visiting bench and you see them all go like this. And they all patting each other in the hockey tail pad on the way off the ice, as if to say, guys, this is 2 points in any other building. We should have had them tonight. Don't hang your head. And that's how several teams left the TD Garden Ice last year because of Linus Ullmark.
Yep.
He gets injured right at the end of the regular season. Playoffs are a hot mess. He wasn't good when they weren't good in front of him. And now all of a sudden, that's who he is? All the polls of who the best goalies are in the league, and that's who Linus Ullmark is going forward? Is not the guy who did what he did in the regular season, but he's the guy who in the playoffs? And find that to be the most incredible part.
Two things. There's a difference between regular season and playoffs. No, at forward position, at defenseman position, at the goalie position, at head coach, coaching staff, like across the board. I think there are two different phenomenons, two different styles of play, two different levels of demand for those particular players. It's just two different beasts when you look at it, right? I have no doubt at this point that Linus Ullmark can play an elite level of goaltending during the regular season for about 50 games, and will be. I think he can recreate what he did during this past regular season during the regular season. Like, I think he can play at that level. I'm willing to buy into that, and I've seen enough of that to say he could be that guy. Because once you do something once, you certainly are capable of it again, and he's shown that he has that highest ceiling. My thing about him is that it's not just this past playoff. It's his it's a pattern now.
It's only 2 years.
But 2 years is enough, I think, to start to make a determination.
He was injured. He was injured in this one.
Yeah,
so several
to what
other
degree,
players,
though?
as we learned.
Even his GM didn't really back him on the injury, right?
There was a lot of wish-wash about that, because I think people didn't want to retell a different story than the one that was being told when they decided to play him. They had to hold up to that and make him accountable for it.
My read on that whole thing was that I think he was looking for an excuse, and so he was injured. There's no question about it. But like the reports of significant injury, whatever it was, that were pretty much poo-pooed by the Bruins. That tells me
they don't want the opponent to think that he's injured.
This was after the playoffs were over, Mick. This was Don Sweeney after it was over, basically saying that whatever Ullmark was playing through was not even close to what Bergeron was playing through, basically saying it was not a significant injury. So like, I'll give him a bit of a mulligan for the injury, but like, you also have to call it like it is, where he's had 2 playoffs in a row where he has not played well. And he also, I think, it's definitely a formed opinion at this point that like the more he plays, the more the effectiveness goes down, and he's not going to be able to play like a huge workload over a long.
Not going to be Marty Brodeur.
Yeah, you know what I mean. Like, he's going to need a number 2 or a 1A that can play 35 games during the regular season, and a guy that's going to be able to spell him in the playoffs. Because I think at this point, what I see out of Linus Ullmark is he's not a guy that night in, night out for 2 months in the playoffs is going to be able to maintain his mental and physical performance. And like, we've seen it now a couple times in a row. And certainly maybe
I'm gonna just respectfully not sign up to that.
No, that's fine.
To that continuum. I need a third season in order to feel like I can connect the dots of 22 and 23.
Yeah, I can give Hampus Lindholm a third season, because I think he had a legit injury against Carolina, and he talked about how he had a fractured foot, whatever. He was able to play, and he didn't really miss time down the stretch. He mentioned that as part of the reason he was dreadful in that.
But he played like he was walking on coals. He
did, and he looked like something was up with him. There's no doubt about it. Like, Ullmark to me didn't really look like he was hurt. He looked like he was completely out of sorts when I was watching him play. He was taking himself out of plays. He was hyperactive in the net, and he was doing things that, like, I didn't
You're
feel
not
like
right. That's what you do.
yeah, but it wasn't like he was like slow to get up or anything like that. You know what I mean? There were certain things you see with goalies where you know that they're hurt and significantly hurt. And you're right. It could
Remember the
affect
year that Tim Thomas lost his job to Tuca, 09-10, right? Okay,
Yep.
we found out right after breakup day that Tim Thomas had hip surgery.
Yep.
Okay, so he told me after that he had to play a different way in order to make saves because of the injury.
Right.
It was forced him to do it different.
Yep.
And he wound up reinventing himself and playing a spectacular practice sessions. Him and Marchand had this incredible thing down in Philadelphia's Wells Fargo, whatever they called it at the time.
Yeah.
Where they were playing. Marchand was a black ace.
Yep.
Boy, it would have been great if he was in that series.
No, instead they went with Trent Whitfield. God bless him. One of my favorite guys, he was playing instead of Marchand in that playoffs.
And who had a clean breakaway that if he scores, it's over in 4 straight.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, we don't want to go back there. I want another year out of Linus before I decide that there's a continuum in an opinion for me as far as his. Not that I want him to be one of those. I'm not a big fan.
Yeah.
I like the 2 goalie thing. I like there to be a two guys and 1 guy, a lead guy, a second guy, but the second guy to be a really good guy. And I feel like that's exactly what they have.
They do, but like and maybe Elmark uses like what's going on now as motivation, and it's a completely different story, and that would be great. That'd be a great story if it happens. But I do feel like I'm very dubious about him being able to play every other game for 2 months in the playoffs and do what Tim Thomas did in 2011 at this point, like after what I've seen out of him. So like that part like changes my sort of calculation about him as a player in general. If he needs somebody both regular season and the playoffs to be able to support him and he can't do it by himself, that sort of changes my idea. But beyond the goaltending, just in general, like, where are you on the thermometer
finish?
Whatever. Where are you on the thermometer of
when Ottawa came in last year, I looked at their D and I thought, holy crap, these guys are going to be tough when they get it figured out. And a little more maturity. They are nasty. And Buffalo, look at their defense. I'm thinking these are going to be tough outs. These teams may not have a lot going in front. The Bruins are saying,
Detroit's a lot better too.
Right. But you know something, Yzerman seemed to take a step back and sort of recognize that things hadn't really fallen, forward for their team the way he originally thought, projected, and that now he's sort of behind those two, I think, in his own mind. At least that's what he said publicly. Maybe he's playing me for a fool.
I mean, when you look at the roster, they're a lot better than they were last year. They made a lot of changes this offseason. And I think they've brought in significant talent, and they've got some young players. Mo Seider's awesome. Like they've got some really good.
Yeah, he's a really impactful player.
So the goaltending I think is still a question mark. But like the point being, I think everybody in that division, Montreal probably still a year or two away, but they're going to be tougher to play too.
I don't know. I mean, I don't even know if Montreal has a path in the next 5 years because the Bruins are not that old a team anymore.
Right.
So, and I look at them, I think that the disappointment over what could have been in the spring and what turned out not to happen, I think has really become too much of a black cloud over an objective look of what this team should be when I take the temperature of the fans. Oh, they're going to be terrible. They're going to suck. I'm thinking like, well, if you think that 09-10 Bruins team that went just as far as the 08-09 116-point Bruins team went,
right, that
they sucked because we were halfway through that season, and after the winning the Winter Classic, it got really dark for several weeks, which they had hard time scoring goals. They were missing some parts up front, but they were maturing as a group. They were getting better. They were getting ready for that next season and what would follow. We just couldn't see it. And I think that, you look at a lot of these guys now. Freddie's 25. He's 25.
Yep.
The other guys are 20. Zach 26. DeBrus 26. These guys are now into that second phase of their career, firmly into the second phase of their career, where they're no longer a young guy. Can he do it? No, he's our team. He can do it. He can do it now, and he can do it for several years. We are now getting into the sweet spot of these careers. This young nucleus, their time is now. And yeah, is it a lot in their shoulders? Absolutely. Marchand's the old man. You know, so and here's, you know, something else that I really hate talking about, because I feel like he's given them so much of his body to the Bruins. But Marchand only really kind of looked like Marchand for a short spell last season. And then it got rough for him again. And I don't know if there's a pathway for him, you know, post double labrum. I don't really know if he's ever going to be the old guy. You know, they always have these wonderful, oh, this is going to repair it. This is going to be great. It's going to be fine. And, you know, but he's 35 now. And the combination of all those things, there's a lot of elite athletes in this world who have had labrum surgery in their 30s that things didn't ever come back for them the way I'm not saying the surgery was the problem. It's just that that's where they were in their career. I'm not sure where he is in his anymore.
Yeah, I mean, we're still talking about a guy that, what did he have? Like 25 goals and 70-something points or whatever it was. We're still talking about a guy that was pretty good last year, even
he finds a way,
less than his best. You know what I mean?
If they ever needed him to be the game driver that he was for the last few seasons prior to that injury, this is when they need it. And I'm not sure it's in there anymore. And so this is really kind of makes it so when that's why I don't talk about him much, because I don't really know what to expect. He's another X factor. Not that he's not a worthwhile player. I'd keep him around in any level he could be.
But there's a lot. There's a lot on his shoulders now with
there's so much there. Yes. Right. And so are these alternate captains practices?
That's a good question. That's a good question. I didn't even, you know what? That's a good question. We should probably call it alternate captains practices. ACP for sure.
ACP.
All right. We've got the Twitter or social media question of the week, I should say. This is from Steve Mallow via the Facebook fan page. They're going to have elite defense and goaltending besides Pasta and Marchand, though. Will we have enough firepower to score enough goals? That is the $1 million question, Mick.
For what? Enough goals to make the playoffs.
Have goals to be a viable offensive team and make the playoffs. Yeah, to make the enough playoffs, to win games.
I think they got enough. I think there's enough there, because if you look at it, you're still looking at Marchand, Pasternak, and DeBrusk are three highly coveted wingers that any team would love to have. Everybody knows that this is a donut team now, and Montreal Canadiens in the greatest season ever assembled, like not ever, but in the post-expansion era of 1967 and forward, the 76-77 Canadiens, until they get pretty deep into the season, they didn't know who to play between Lafleur and Schutt. It was Pete Mahovlich, then it was Jacques Lemaire, then it was Pete, and then finally it was Lemaire, and that's the way it stayed. And Lemaire was a two-way guy. He was not a superstar. He was a hard-nosed, hard-skating, smallish, highly skilled but understated point production kind of guy. Did he have some really good seasons a few years before that, 72, 73? Yep. But, you know, if you got elite talent in the wings, your center has to be can be a good complementary player to them and hold up his end of the 200-foot game.
Yep. And
if you got that, then, you know, I mean, these days, look how much Marchand was a line driving winger for the in the Marchand mold for the Vegas Golden Knights. Now, granted, we got a Conn Smythe here, but I'm talking about when they went to the final the first time. That was like a Marchand revelation, considering the Panthers were like, yeah, sure, go ahead. and this guy winds up being a line driving winger. Now, the line driving winger has sort of become almost a prototypical thing, whether it's Panarin, Pasternak, Patrick Kane, who's a huge model for this. If you don't have the dominant playmaking center, then you can get it from the winger. Then maybe that's your ticket. And I think that's why the Rangers got the wrong players at the deadline last year and loaded up, bringing in more elite wing talent.
Yeah, too many wingers.
I
Not
think they
enough
were
pucks.
enamored. I suspect that Chris Drury was enamored by the Bruins and the season they were having, and thinking, how do we match that? And looking at the embarrassment of riches with Taylor Hall, Bertuzzi,
Yeah.
what did they do? They got Kane and was it Tarasenko they got?
Yeah, and sometimes
they went
GMs
crazy.
sometimes GMs just buy into, like, especially when they're early on, buy into like that they need to create an all-star team and worry about like where guys are playing later. And that doesn't work in hockey. It never works.
People love to talk crap about Mike Keenan, but I'll tell you one thing. The changes he influenced on the New York Rangers that led to their 1994 Stanley Cup, that's what the Rangers should have done last year. They needed more grit. They needed more grind. They needed more toughness. That's the accent that's the one thing about this Bruins team that I would really like to see. I've been a Don Sweeney fan since he was in Providence, overseeing their prospects. However, in his quest to be a team that can win any kind of game, he hasn't translated it into playoff success in the ultimate prize, obviously. But it's been harder and harder for him to translate it at all. And going forward, now that you have a situation you didn't ask for, where you really have to fill in some major holes in your team, I'm thinking this needs to be an opportunity to have bigger, faster, meaner, stronger, tougher, more intimidating. If you can't give me my next Patrice Bergeron or David Krejci, then give me what you can give me. Yes. Give me more of that forward thinking and the muscle to do it. Give me what I can get and fill in that way, and at least make yourself a tougher out.
Well, this is why when we talked earlier, I talked about the two different beasts that the regular season and the playoffs are. You need different kinds of players to have success in the playoffs, especially over a 2-month period. But, at times to answer or even start, issues with teams like the Panthers, rather than either reacting to what they're doing or not reacting at all, which is even worse, to them pushing you around and really upping the physical ante. And, it's easier said than done to find a lot of those players that are bigger, faster, meaner, stronger. Those are coveted players and they're hard to find, but now is becoming the time. And I don't think it's going to happen this year, but I think over this season and the next off season, when they have much more salary cap space, when the salary cap goes up, this is the time.
Are you still as confident as you've been about that?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Glad to hear it.
This is the time.
The feedback I'm getting lately.
This is the time to reinvent themselves, as far as who they are and what they are. Because it's going to agree with that
100%.
It's going to have to be under those circumstances. This is going to be their opportunity.
This is their window. You didn't ask for it, but now you got it. Make the most of it.
Right. But I don't necessarily see now as that. It's next summer. It's a year from now when they're going to have that chance to really do that. I don't think are in a situation where they have enough freedom of movement to be able to do anything like that. Just given the state that everybody's in salary cap wise right now, I just don't think they're going to be kind of gridlocked unless
your season goes south and you want to
of course,
do some teardowns.
But I don't foresee that coming unless it's an absolute disaster for the Boston.
Couple key injuries could do it. If McAvoy got hurt, if Ullmark got hurt. I know people love Jeremy Swayman, and I think he's terrific too. I thought that an underrated part of last season is how his starts were crafted by Montgomery to be put him in a position to be successcul.
Yeah, at the beginning, but Sullivan. I think by midway through the year, that was kind of out the window, and he was playing at a very high level and outplaying Ullmark at times in the second half of the year. And then he gets put in a really difficult spot in Game 7 that he should have been put in the spot earlier in that series. And
that whole thing was wrong.
That's the flip. That's the flip side of the coin with Swayman too. Is that Ullmark has gotten all these chances to start playoff series. Swayman has been put into tough positions. He has not been afforded a Game 1 start and to see what he can do running with the ball in the postseason. And that's something I'd like to see this time around in the playoffs. Is him get that opportunity instead of waiting until something happens with Ullmark or things go sideways to play him. But neither here nor there, Mick. We will have you on again to continue to break down all of this stuff and talk Boston Bruins. Thank you very much for being here. I want to thank our sponsors, Fanduel, exclusive wagering partner of the CLNS Network. Visit fanduel.com/Boston right now, and you can get started with your bets. With the NFL season, offer you don't want to miss. And Factor Meals, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit. Go to factormeals.com/Haggs50 and use code Haggs50 to get 50% off your first box. Not just a pitch man, also a client. Mick, thank you very much. I will talk to you soon.